What's going on, my peoples? 𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐴 in the building, back with another video from Okay Beatz. And in this video, we are going to be mixing and enhancing a beat that I created in a prior video. So, without further ado, I hope you're listening so you can catch these gems. Let's go ahead and get into this DAW screen and pull up this session, which is 107 BPM in tempo, and we named this Born Wild. That's what we named the beat, guys, Born Wild. So right now I'm opening up the channel rack, and the first thing that I'm gonna do is click on all of these boxes right here. By double clicking on one box, you're basically selecting all of them. Once you see that all of those little boxes are selected on the channel rack, you go ahead and hold Command and press L. Once you do that, each and every sound on that channel rack is going to be transferred to a channel on this mixer. Once this mixer window opens up, you can go in here, shift and click any one of these inserts, and you will be able to change the name on any one of those channels. In this case, I don't want to change any of the names. I just want to organize the instruments that are involved in my mix, all of the elements. And I want to have everything clearly visible and accessible to me. So what I like to do is I like to start off, everything in my mix has a place in the frequency spectrum where it generally sits. I like to put the order of those instruments in my mixer window in the same order that I would see it in the spectral analysis window of an EQ. So what that means is, if you look at the EQ spectrum, you'll find that the low frequencies are found generally to the left side of this, while the high frequencies are generally found to the right side of the spectrum. So I want to put all of my low instruments, my low energy instruments. When I say low energy, I mean low frequency energy instruments, as far to the left as possible, and then follow along with the next, with the next sound that basically comes after that one, in the frequency spectrum as well, in the order of the frequency spectrum. So the very first thing, logically, that's going to go all the way to the left, which is number 1 over here on the left track, on the very first track, is going to be my 808, because that is the lowest frequency on my entire spectrum here. So when I press play, I'm going to see exactly where this 808 is, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in the first insert. So here, let's go. There you go. So I got number 6 over here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on number 6, hold Option, and press left. And this is going to move that insert all the way to the left. Next, I'm going to look for the kick, because the kick is the next thing in the frequency spectrum that follows the 808, because it's in the lows as well. So let's find that. There you go. So it's already on the second one. So after this, usually comes the snare. So I'm going to look for the snare real quick. I could easily just go into the channel rack and just look for the snare, which is over here. The snare is in track number 5. So I can go to track number 5 and hold Option and send it over next to my kick. So we have the 808, the kick, and the snare. After the snare, I'm gonna go ahead and find this hi-hat, which I believe is this one. The hi-hat is not necessarily going to be the next thing in the frequency spectrum, but it is gonna let me know that I'm reaching the end of my drums instruments. So I know that if I come across any other percussion, I know that I have to put it in between my hi-hat and my snare, because anything else in the percussion is in that general area on the frequency spectrum. I hope that makes sense. And if not, let me know in the comment section so I can make a video to explain that better. So yeah, the hi-hat is gonna go right after the snare. Now I know that all of the percussions are gonna go somewhere in between the snare and the hi-hat. You understand? Because I know the hi-hat is the highest thing in the drums. It's the highest frequency in the drums comes from the hi-hats. Also can come from cymbals, but that's neither here nor there. We'll come across that bridge. So let's press play and see what other sounds belong in between the snare and the hi-hat. Okay, I think this percussion right here definitely belongs behind this hi-hat. Let's see what else. Okay, here's another percussion I found. I'm gonna put that next to that percussion and next to the last percussion. And then let's see what else. Okay, we got this little cymbal over here, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring that right after the hi-hat, because I think the cymbal definitely sounds a little bit higher in the frequency spectrum than the hi-hats. So let's keep listening. Okay, we got this little vocal effect here, so we're gonna take that and send that behind the hi-hat as well. Okay, so now we have the creeper drone, which is part of the melody. So that's going to go after all of the percussion. And then we also have the augmented brass, which is also part of the melody, which means it's where it's supposed to be in relation to all of the other instruments. And then we have these two crashes here. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight both of these crashes and send those crashes behind the melody as well, because we know that those are going to be part of the high frequency range percussions. So now that everything is in order, I want to listen to everything and just see how all the levels kind of sit in the mixer window when I got everything in order and press and play. So let's see. See, so by looking at these levels over here on the mixer window on each channel, I can kind of see and have an idea of what the entire frequency spectrum looks like now, because I have the lows where the lows are in the frequency spectrum, and I have the highs where the highs are in the frequency spectrum for the most part. So I can kind of see how full the frequency spectrum is looking. And that's what we kind of want when we're making beats, guys. We want to fill the frequency spectrum purposefully, obviously, not just with gibberish or nonsensical sounds, but, you know, in a musical way, we want to fill the entire frequency spectrum so that the beat sounds as full as possible, you know? So that's that. Now that we have everything in the mixer where it belongs, let's go ahead and level everything out. So things that sound too loud, we're going to turn them down with these faders, and anything that sounds too low, we're going to turn it up with the faders. I don't think anything is going to sound too low, so we're just going to go ahead and control what needs to come down. All right, so one thing at a time, and here it goes. So as you can see, I've turned down mostly everything slightly or drastically, and I just want to make sure that I can hear everything clearly, and I want to turn it down to the point where it's not too loud. Too loud is where it sounds bad. So wherever it starts sounding bad, pull back. All right. So now we got this mix kind of leveled out here. Now what we're going to do is look at the stereo field of each one of these instruments. The way that we're going to do that is when we're going to go to this little knob over here. This is called the stereo knob on each one of these channels. So I'm going to reset it by right clicking on it. And then as I scroll it to the left, I'm separating the stereo. So I'm making it more stereo. And if I send it to the right, then basically I'm merging the channels more, so I'm making it more mono. Generally, I want low frequency things such as the kick and the bass to be down the center in mono. And then as things start going higher into the frequency spectrum, we can start spreading out the sounds a little bit more. So as things get higher in the frequency spectrum, the further apart they should sound, or the more stereoized they should be. So let's go ahead and carry that out real quick. Now, we don't want to merge and separate ridiculously, because that's not going to sound natural when you hear it back, when you play it back on other sources. Right now we're mixing on headphones, so everything is going to kind of sound like in the ballpark, really tight. But when you play this on a different source like car speakers or some kind of loudspeakers, you're going to notice that some of these things may sound too far apart, or they might be too present, which means they're too merged. So, you know, we don't want to do any extreme movements. We just want to try to keep it as slight as possible. And any adjustments we need to make sure that they're slight adjustments, not extreme. So with that said, let's go ahead and merge the kick and the bass a little bit. So let's just see what that sounds like. Okay, so I like what the kick and the bass sound like together in relation to one another in mono. So it's not like anything's masking right now. Let's continue. All right, so this snare and the perks is where we're going to start spreading some things out. Not necessarily the snare. I want the snare to stay down the middle. Actually, I'm gonna turn it down slightly right here. But I want the snare to stay down the middle with the kick and the bass. So I'm gonna leave that one alone. But all of the percussive instruments that come after that in the mixer, we're going to go ahead and give it a little tiny bit of stereoization. And then the further towards the end of that spectrum we get, the further we're gonna send that stereo knob. So let's see what this sounds like. As you can see, I've already pre-turned them, but I'm going to adjust that as I hear it needs adjustment. Okay, so let's listen. So I like the general stereo field that we have going on right now. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and stereoize these crashes a little bit as well. Go ahead and stereoize this melody a little bit too, and we'll hear how it sounds, and we'll go ahead and adjust it as we listen to it and we feel like it needs adjustment, we'll go ahead and do that. Another thing that I want to show you guys is this knob over here. This knob is the panning knob, and that is going to determine which side of the stereo image you're going to listen to this instrument. So for instance, if I take this bongo and I send it all the way to the left, then chances are we're going to hear it on the left speaker. We're supposed to, not chances are, we're supposed to hear it only on the left speaker when it's playing. So the same thing, when I send it all the way to the right, we should only hear it on the right speaker or on the right headphone when I play it. Now, I don't necessarily pan things extreme left or extreme right all the time. Sometimes I do, you know, depending on what it is that I'm mixing. But when it comes to hip hop in particular, most of the things live somewhere in the middle of the frequency spectrum of the stereo field. So let's keep that in mind, you know, when we're sending things left and right. You know, not everything goes left and right. So most things go, you know, somewhere close to the center. So just keep that in mind. And let's go ahead and put some of these elements where we want to hear them on the stereo field. Alright, so I only just did a few things. Everything else I kind of just want to keep more centered than anything. As I said, I'm not going to do any drastic moves. These chants, you know, I pan them a little bit to the left, to the right, and then this percussion over here, the bongo, I panned it a little bit to the left, and the hi-hats panned it slightly to the left, but you know, that's gonna be heard on both sides nonetheless. It's just, you know, if you hear it in context with the mix and it sounds good, or it enhances it, or it allows something else to be heard better, and whatever the purpose may be, but do it with a purpose. Don't just do it just because you want to, you know, mess with some knobs. Do it with a purpose. Do it because it sounds better. So with that said, now that we have the faders in place, we have the stereo field in place, and we also have the panning in place, now we're going to go on to the next step of the mixing process here, and that's going to be EQ. So what we're going to do is something special, guys. We're not going to use any plugins. We're going to stick to the EQ that FL Studio gives us with each channel on the mixer. So for instance, this 808 over here has if we maximize this mixer window over here, we'll notice that we have EQ at the bottom right corner over here. Most people don't notice this because they have this mixer screen small like this or collapsed, you know, so some people, they miss it, you know, they don't notice they have this. But anyway, it's a very good EQ, just let me say, first of all. Second of all, it's going to save you a ton of processing if you do this first to all of your sounds. Once you do this, you know, it's very, very minimal what needs to be done with any of the other sounds, with any other plugins and such, especially if you chose good sounds to begin with. So anyways, usually what we do with the kick and the bass is that we make sure that the kick is not in the way of the bass. So the extreme lows of the kick and the bass kind of clash because they're all in the same ballpark, in the same area of the frequency spectrum. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the kick, we're going to highlight the kick, and we're just going to slightly bring down this EQ band over here. As we can see, we have 3 bands. So each fader represents a different band on the EQ spectrum. This is the frequency spectrum right here of this EQ. These are the lows, these are the mids, and these are the highs. So those 3 faders represents those 3 bands on the EQ. This one represents the lows, this one's the mids, and this one's the highs. So I'm gonna go ahead and slightly lower this low band, just slightly, just maybe like 2.5 dB, and I'm also going to bring it over to about 30 hertz because I don't want to chop off so much frequency range. I just want to chop off the very low lows so that way it's not clashing with the very low lows of the 808. So as you can see, if I click on the 808, there's nothing on the EQ over here. But if I click on the kick, the little EQ rolls off over here towards 30 hertz. So another thing that we want to do is go to the 808 one and kind of roll off the highs now. Now on this one, we can be a little bit generous and just kind of roll down the highs all the way from 8K and on, just because we don't really hear any frequencies in the 808 that are that high in the frequency spectrum. So let's go ahead and listen to let's just hear what it sounds like in context right now, the kick and the bass. All right, so that sounds pretty good in my opinion. So we can go ahead and move on to the snare. For the snares, I usually roll off all of the lows, anything below like 120K or 120 hertz. And we usually just roll off all of the lows from the snare because we don't need to hear any of those frequencies. And then the percussion, the same thing. We're going to roll off all the lows on the percussion, on all of the percussion, because we don't need to hear any low frequencies on any of our percussive instruments. Hi-hat, cymbal, crashes, open hats, all that stuff does not need all those lows. And we're gonna do that with the melodies as well. Anything below 90 hertz, we don't need to hear that. So let's hear how this sounds now. So as you can see, that frees up a lot of headroom for other things that you might want to do to the mix, like, like glue the melody together. The way that we glue the melody together is by highlighting both of the melody tracks and then right-clicking on a totally separate channel, the bottom arrow here over here. Just right-click on that and say route to this track only. So that way it's going to unroute it from anything else that it's routed to, and it's going to route it to this track only. And then the one that you did route it to, shift and click on it to change the title into melody. And then let me go ahead and move it over to the left so it could be in front of the melody instrument. So now you know that these two melodies are routed into this melody track right here and nothing else. So on this melody track now, I'm going to go ahead and put 𝐂𝐈𝐊𝐄 stereo by Waves, and we're gonna go ahead and compress it, not drastically, but we're gonna be generous. So let's hear what that sounds like. And we're gonna toggle it on and off so we can hear what it sounds like on and off. As you can see, this compressor makes that melody pop out, but it doesn't make it sound strange. It doesn't make it overly loud. It kind of just glues it to the track. So you can hear how it kind of just goes together with everything else and, doesn't lose its place in the frequency spectrum. So that's good for that. I'm going to turn that down a little bit, just to compensate for the level that was added to it by putting the compression on it. So I just backed off a little bit on that fader because I don't want that level to increase necessarily. I just want it to be perceived as louder, but not to literally be louder. Because if I do make it literally louder, it's going to mask something else that I have in my mix. So with that said, we're going to do something slightly similar with all of the drum tracks, including the percussion. So we're going to go ahead and take all of those and right click on this arrow over here and say route to this track only. So then I'm going to name this track drums and send that all the way back here by the drums as well. So now I see that all of my drums are behind the drums track. And actually what I want to do is take out the kick and the bass so that those are not included in this drum bus, because those actually are going to be processed separately from the rest of the drums. That means the snare and all of the percussion and the hi-hats are going to be on this drum bus, not the kick and the bass. The kick and the bass, they're mono. They're part of the mono section of this mix. So we want to keep those separately from the rest of the drums that are going to be heard in stereo. So let's hear what this sounds like so far, guys. So as we did with the melody, we kind of glued the track together. We're going to do the same thing with the drums, except we're going to choose a different compressor that I like to use on drums. And that one is called the DBX. Let me see, where is that thing? So it's hiding from me, but I'll find it. Here it is, the DBX 160 stereo compressor. And this is what that looks like. And then we'll hear it and we'll find a good preset and then kind of make slight adjustments to the preset when we find the right one. So let's hear it. I like this preset right here. It's called backing vocals. I know that we're not using it on backing vocals, but it's just what the preset is called. If it sounds good, it sounds good. We can't control that, but it sounds good in this case. So I'm gonna bring down this gain a little tiny bit because I hear that it kind of made it pop out a little bit too much. And put that at 5.5 and let's see what this sounds like. And I like the way that sounds. So last but not least, I'll go into this master bus here and I'll turn off this limiter and now see what it sounds like. So yeah, people, that's how you get your mix without so many darn plugins eating up your processing. All right. I hope y'all learned some gems. What I'm going to do now is, as I listen to the whole track, I'm going to make slight variations throughout the entire beat. About every 4 to 8 bars, I'm going to make some kind of change in the pattern so that we don't bore the audience with the same pattern over and over again. So, you know, at the end of the day, that's what we call arrangement. So I'm going to make certain modifications to the arrangement and then we're going to print the track, guys, and that's the beat. So I appreciate you for listening and following along and subscribing and watching my content. I'm going to go ahead and ride out this session by allowing you to watch how I make slight variations. If you want any beats, go to www.okbeatz.com. That's OKAYBEATZ.com. Check out obsbot.com to get your Tiny 2 Lite by OBSBot. And remember, it's only at $159 right now, so it's at a special price right now on the website, and it's one of the dopest devices you can have as a content creator. And also remember that it integrates easily with your Stream Deck and with your OBS. Allows you to do a whole bunch of awesome features. And yeah, without further ado, let's ride out this session with these slight modifications every 4 to 8 bars, guys. Just all you have to do is just take out a certain pattern that you don't, want to hear, or modify the position of the pattern every 4 to 8 bars to make the variation of the pattern. So that way you don't bore your audience. All right, guys, here we go.